Hello all, I'm Kia.Kelpie. Welcome to this art channel of mine where I make stuff. Today I'm going to take you through some speed draws where I redesign my Genshin Impact OC in the styles of different animated studios. This is a two-parter, stay tuned for the second one that should be up in a couple of days. This is mainly a style recreation challenge where I teach myself to be able to copy the style of other artwork. You can be the judge of whether I'm successful or not. And if you think I failed, please tell me so in the comments and share it with your friends so you can all talk about how bad or good I am at art. Without further ado, let's get into it. I'm beginning with Genshin Impact. This was my first attempt to do anything like this, so as the series goes on, I'll get more confident in my attempts to match styles. I start with some simple posing. With the magic of editing, you won't notice, but finding the right pose takes up a lot of the actual drawing time. I drew some very loose sketches just to see what stance I wanted, and then I took it from there. So my OC is called Madeline. I actually created her to be an OC for Genshin originally before I had the idea to draw her for lots of different styles. Designing a character for anything is more than just wondering what they'll look like. You have to consider their place in the story. The same principle will apply to all my designs going forward. Just roughing out the plot, and in case you are wondering, it is the part I will redraw the most. Of course we're getting some puffy sleeves in the mix. Nothing screams swashbuckling fantasy period France other than some puffy sleeves. My rough idea for Madeline is she's from Fontaine. I already knew what outfit I wanted her to wear, so Fontaine fashion matched best. Her being from Fontaine and Fontaine basically being Genshin France is how I picked the name. I have good memories of both the snack and the TV show. Finally starting the line. You do not know how many hours of sketching it took to get to this stage. Genshin art does have lines, but they are very thin. I was working on a 6x9 inch Procreate canvas, so it was hard getting a tiny brush that worked the way I wanted it to. Me trying to remember what a plot looks like. She'd be an Anemo sword user. She'd have a move where she'd fly around and apply swirl reaction to enemies, kind of like Mizuki. For those who aren't in the know, Anemo is basically air magic and can be infused with other elements to create a reaction and do greater damage. Anyway, this ability is my main inspiration for the pose in her official art. I wanted it to look like she'd been flying around, slicing at enemies, and then she suddenly stops. I wanted to capture the moment between fast movement and sudden stopping. She's still, but her clothes and hair are still affected by that motion. I'm giving the bow extra detail. Genshin is notorious for characters having so many little bits and bobs. In fact, the main reason this drawing isn't the authentic Genshin style I'd planned is because Madeline doesn't have enough random, complicated little details. Here you see my main method for keeping layers distinct. I block in one section with pure color, and I make a clipping mask and do my color and shading layer on top of that. This way I don't have to worry about coloring inside the lines. I use different shades of grey just to keep it distinct when I'm looking at it. Not good at closing my lines, so when I'm filling in a section, I just draw around the edges and then I just use the paint bucket tool to fill in the rest of it. The other good thing about this method of coloring is it's really easy to go back and make changes. Like, I don't like the vision here, so I'm just changing the line work real quick. You'll see me go back and make more changes later on. And I'm finally on to color. Ningguang will be my main reference for this piece to match the style. I actually think the legs here are the most style-accurate part of the finished piece. That's just a learning process. It doesn't matter if it doesn't come out exactly the way you want it. You learn by doing. Something I noticed while looking up reference for this piece. Barely any Genshin characters have bare necks. I think Ayaka and Toma have the most bare necks of the bunch. Also, Genshin is one of the few franchises I'm doing that's targeted for adults, so the women are designed to show more skin. I actually appreciate how they go about it. The outfits have fan service, but they're designed in a way that me as a woman would want to cosplay as. I experiment a lot with getting the hair as close to the style as possible. I do a bunch of overlays, but ultimately I just color it in. Color pick from Lisa. I do a lot of experimenting with the hair. A nice gleam. Try to get a nice light blue in with the green. I'm shading those beautiful sleeves. Genshin has like a mix of soft shading and hard shading. I have an upcoming video where I attempt to master Genshin's style better. Here I try to add more detail to her costume by putting patterns on her dress. Don't get attached because I will change it later. Shading the sash was fun because I could play around with light. I was trying to make it a bit translucent. At this point, I was so tired, I was not designing my own background. Luckily, I got some free ones from Jelly Julie on Instagram, and they also go by Kiki Kazuchi on Hoyo Lab. In the spirit of overly complicated, unnecessary details, I changed the pattern on the dress to just be really, really super detailed, and then I gave it a nice little clipping mask, and then I could make a really subtle, like, yellow pattern out of it. My inspiration for her sash is windows, so here I try to get a pattern that I was happy with. Those are the little Hermes-inspired wings. They pop out when she's flying around. When I started this, I had not thought about copying the Genshin weapon style, and I can barely draw swords as is, so I gave her a rapier-inspired sword to at least be fitting with the setting. Next time, I'll try to deconstruct the weapon art as well as the character art. I could not for the life of me figure out how to draw the nose with the brushes that I had on hand, so I just stole Ningguang's nose. I hope she won't mind. All Genshin 5-star characters have a signature weapon that usually matches them aesthetically. The only thing I changed about the background with the logo, I wanted to match the design in the official art. The logo is dependent on the character's vision type, so here's me trying to manually change the color. In the end, I gave up and just stole the logo from Sucrose. And there you have it. There's definitely a lot of things I'd do differently if I was doing it again. The style match isn't perfect, but I think it was a great first attempt. For this piece, I'm drawing Madeline in Disney's classic 2D animation style. Like before, the posing took way too long. When you design a character, you don't just want to physically draw them, you want to convey their personality. Classic Disney princesses focus more on feminine grace. Genshin Madeline wields a sword, Disney Madeline does not, but I'm going to enhance Madeline's feminine elegance. Classic Disney princesses don't physically move as much. They're not action heroes. But they still move in a distinguished, floaty manner. I wanted to draw Madeline as if she was lost in song, serenading the local wildlife. Going forward, you'll notice that none of my versions of Madeline will be carbon copies of each other. I'll be keeping what fits the idea of her in my mind, but shaping that to fit the specific art style. This Madeline doesn't wear her hair in a plait because most Disney princesses have their hair down, and when they do have plaits, they're more realistically thin plaits. I'm keeping the puffy sleeves. These sleeves are going to be my favorite part of this piece. Drawing detailed clothes are like drawing hands. Even if the principle is simple, the fact that they can take such different poses means they're the hardest. How do I draw something that's basically the frills of a dress, but on an arm that requires even more movement? I have to keep the length the same, take into account the thickness of how the fabric rests, the fact it's being affected by gravity. That just makes the results so much more satisfying. Just blocking in the shape of the dress. I will change it so it's being affected by the wind. Disney princesses wear their hair down, but it doesn't move as much. Longer hair moving only really came in later in the Disney Renaissance with characters like Pocahontas and Ariel. I wanted the airy chic look you see in Pocahontas, but Aurora was my main reference for this piece. Disney's style is much more straightforward to replicate. I found you can really tell if you're doing well if you can see the style matching in the face. That's something I struggled with in one of the later drawings in this video. So even though Disney princesses are just 2D drawings, you still have a sense of how fluffy and voluminous their hair is, while still keeping it simple enough to animate. It all comes down to the shape. Pocahontas has this beautiful sheet of hair that blows in the wind, but her hair is black, so you don't need to worry about shadow or lines. Madeline's is a dark blonde. To draw it with no lines would make the style look flatter than it's supposed to be. The line art on the dress fumbled me. Do I include it or leave it lineless? That's the kind of thing you need to pay attention to when you're copying a style. When it comes to designing the outfit, instead of keeping it the same, I'll try to just keep motifs. I also want her to be distinguished from other Disney princess outfits. Madeline is the only Disney princess to have this specific getup. Like, she doesn't have an apron, and she's the only one with her dress's outermost garment and so shortly above the main dress. And to maintain her own style, I'll always try to have something in her hair, and a green top above a light blue skirt. Also, the more styles I draw, the more I add to her overall design. Later, I'll choose artistic motifs that I designed for earlier styles, but that had not been part of the initial design at all. Another thing I only learned via attempting this challenge was there were certain considerations that character designers made that you really can't tell at a quick glance. Like classic Disney, there was no Photoshop or shared digital assets. Everything had to be hand-drawn. Backgrounds could have shading because you drew them once, but to add a lot of shadows to the animated characters would take too much time and be too expensive. So they didn't really have a lot of shading. Of course, no shading at all will look unnatural, so to compensate for this, they added something darker that would add more contrast. Madeline has light hair, light skin, and light colors in her dress, and it didn't look right, so I went in with a much darker green than the source colors and only added shading to the lightest colors. I wanted to give Madeline highlights, kind of like how Aurora had hers, but it just didn't make sense for something that was meant to be simple so it could be animated easily. And there you have it. I really like how this one turned out. If there's anything I would do differently, it would probably be my approach to the hair. I was definitely overthinking the whole process of it, when most of art is just vibes-based. But yeah, in terms of matching styles, I accomplished what I had set out to do. Now we're going modern Disney princess. It's not just the fact that Disney has switched to a different type of animation, but the roles Disney princesses play are different too. All modern Disney princesses are action heroes, even when the plot doesn't call for it. That's what the posing of this Madeline is all about. She's a princess, but she's also in charge of her own destiny. When I first envisioned Madeline, I saw her as a normal sword user who also loves to dress up in dresses and take part in other traditionally feminine hobbies. So Madeline gets an action pose. But it really is hard to draw someone who looks like they're running and not just about to fall over. It's hard enough drawing feet, but to draw feet and take perspective into account, that's what you get for choosing to draw a dynamic pose. Modern Disney means I can be a little less modest. Obviously nothing on the scale of Genshin, but since Genshin was my initial inspiration for the character, I gave her bare shoulders. Modern Disney princesses are also frequently barefoot, so I don't know what that says about them. The way 3D animation works is you have a base model, then you animate that. Different animators will work on the same things in the same scene, but you'll only need to create the character once. This means you don't have to draw the character over and over, and you can afford to have more detail in characters. For shadows, you don't need color in shadows. You just program the software to create shadows for you. This was my mistake when I went into this piece. I was trying to copy the style of the characters as seen on screen. They're not initially designed like that. I was basically making extra work for myself by rendering a 3D look on a 2D medium. I still like the way it looked, but I just didn't need to do such a detailed drawing. The hair is one of the most complicated things for 3D animators to do, and Disney's 3D style is based on Pixar's 3D style. 3D animation is still art, you can still design it any way you want, but because Pixar is the leading authority in 3D animation technology, they focus on realism. I'm basically drawing a 2D rendering of a 3D model based off 2D character designs that were put to 3D modeling that is trying to copy realism. Yeah, way too much work, but at least the hair turned out extra detailed. Locking in all those strands of hair took way too long, and this is why animators don't include that much detail unless they get to use a pre-existing model. I'm working with the same problems the early Pixar animators had, where their skin texture looked much too plastic. If I had just used brown in the shading, Madeline would look like she had a beard, and modern Disney can't handle that. That bow was far too easy to finish compared to what will come next. Like the shadows, 3D models can have as many ruffles as they want, because a computer is simulating the physics that allow for these ruffles, so the animators don't have to do as much work. But that doesn't help me. What also doesn't help me is that dresses don't actually act that way in real life, and if you do manage to find a reference of someone running at full sprint in a long, flowy dress, the details just aren't as pretty as you want it to be. I spent a lot of time on the skirt portion of this dress. Here's me trying to recreate the lighting of a 3D animation technology like RenderMan. I'm just one girl. I'm only human. Who am I to dare to recreate the likeness of the world leader in 3D animated software? I do my best, but I end up finding that the skirt part looks much like classical realism paintings. That's the wrong kind of photorealistic artistry. During the Renaissance, art was very much about capturing the form as realistic as possible. And that's just what the skirt will remind me of once I've finished it. I've never tried to do a classical painting. I certainly wouldn't be very good at it. I barely draw in traditional art mediums at all, let alone oil. These paintings would take really long. Like Leonardo da Vinci was working on the Mona Lisa for 20 years or something. I absolutely do not have that patience. I get frustrated mixing colors for acrylic. So even if someone knows the theory behind a realistic painting, application is a whole other problem. Here I take the pattern that was on the body of the dress and then just put it onto the hems and the straps. This keeps the style concise, but also not the exact same. How I'm shading the hair now matches more with my own personal style, which would be fine if I wasn't trying to recreate someone else's style. The method of shading in 2D animation is just draw one shade darker tone. But because Disney's approaching a 3D animation is based off Pixar's approach to 3D animation, shading is meant to match as close to real life as possible. 3D Disney characters' hair is mostly shine and shadow. You can see a hint of those strands where the medium tones and the shadows shines meet. I basically scrapped the style I was using on the hair and try to match that 3D rendering effect as close as possible, which is fine. I'm trying to recreate someone else's 3D style, not my own. Yeah, I redo the dress to make it look more 3D model, less classical painting. To get more into tones, remember when your art teacher tells you to never use black when shading? That's because the eye picks up more colors even in dark settings. Unfortunately for your art teacher, shadows are just shades of black. Black is lack of light. Shadows are where light does not shine. To draw shadows as black is correct. Art only captures a sliver of the colors your eyes perceive, so to add more color to shadowy places makes the art pop more. I believe one of the reasons people find 3D animation so ugly compared to hand-drawn is because Pixar and Disney focus too much on realism. They only have a sliver of understanding of how the human brain interprets light and color, but they still try to make it beautiful. It goes to show just how much you don't expect can have a huge impact on what we perceive as real. And there we have it. I did not need to do all that work. But art is art, and this princess kicks ass, so who am I to complain? This time I'm drawing Madeline in the style of Studio Ghibli. This entire project started off serving a slightly different purpose, which is a separate video I'll upload soon. I was drawing Madeline in all these different styles, and I decided I wanted to design her in Disney styles too. That was going to be part of the main video, but at that point there was so many Madelines, I decided to separate the video out into two parts. Ghibli style is actually the last style I did, so you're seeing the sum of everything I've learned over the course of the project. Ghibli heroines all have the class of classic Disney and all the agency of modern Disney, but they're less spunky and more down to earth. Ghibli movies are full of whimsy, and that's what I tried to capture with this look. Madeline is a protagonist watching as massive, world-shattering powers are unfolding that are terrifying to her, but beautiful to us. I should note I'm referencing fantasy Ghibli specifically, but even the non-fantasy movies can still feel that way. Since Ghibli is hand-drawn, Ghibli heroines also tend not to have long flowing hair most of the time. To match with this, Madeline's hair is considerably shorter. The top part of the dress, I kept the cut similar to the last couple of drawings. I found the straps easily transferable between different styles and outfits, and also distinguished Madeline from the characters I was emulating. Once again, the dress ruffles were the bane of my existence. They look so pretty, but are so hard to get right. For the shape of the dress, Ghibli tends towards the globular for clothes, so I really tried around those corners. For the face, I tried to capture that awestruck, serene expression. Ghibli's hair is one of the most distinctive aspects of its style. The strands of hair that make up the fringe tend to be quite thick. For hand-drawn animation, you don't want to have too many complex details like lots of strands of hair. So you put distinction into the shape, and then you just get really good at drawing that shape. This is the last drawing I did, but it has roughly the same level of detail as the first classic Disney style drawing. But because I've done so many of these, I finished it much faster than that first Disney one. That's the benefit of setting yourself these challenges, as you can really see your progress. When you only have one tone of shading to work with, you become really particular about where you use it. I'll end up using 2 extra tones just because it looks nicer. In an actual animation, the character would have a background with much more detail as well, to make up for the simplicity of the drawing of the character. Looking back now, I probably could have given her more detail in her clothing. Ghibli has always had an eye for detail for that kind of stuff. One of the things that was really bugging me about this drawing was the eyes. I've said before that for style matching, it's critical you get the facial features right. This was a last-minute inclusion in the project, so I hadn't prepared a style sheet, and I was using a full-body reference of Sophie from Howl's Moving Castle, so I couldn't actually see the details of the eyes well. I'll change it again later. It was around here I realized all the proportions were wrong. I had it right in the beginning, but I lengthened the legs when I was fussing over the ruffles of the skirt. First I correct the sketch, then the line art, and then I have to fix the block color, and then I fix the main color, and then I fix the shading. It seems like a lot of steps, but this method is much better than not having that line and block color aiding you. This is a good example of my process of changing all the underdrawings even after having a mostly rendered piece. I finally get a close-up reference of Sophie and fix those eyes. I also fixed the hand because it looked too stiff and I wanted to feel like she was trying to catch the wind. You know, what whimsical protagonists do. I'm honestly pretty proud of this one. I did like the eyes before, I just didn't feel like they really matched the style. Like, I couldn't imagine that version of Madeline in a Studio Ghibli movie. Compared to the first three, there's not a lot of changes I would do if I were to go back to it now. I'd certainly clean up the line work. Compared to the Genshin one, I'd make a lot of changing doing that one again. For classic Disney, I'd change up some of the initial design, but I think I executed the illustration side well. For modern Disney, I'd need to go based off a style sheet. I didn't copy a style here, I rendered a 3D style into a 2D drawing. Yeah, so how much I change is proportional to how much experience I've had. The more experience I've had, the less I wanted to change a sketch. I'd recommend this challenge not just for people who want to improve their character design or drawing skills, but to anyone who wants to know how it feels to improve. Take a skill you already know how to do, doesn't have to be drawing, set a challenge you have no experience of before, and just focus on that for a couple of weeks. You'll see how much better you can become. If you want to see more, I'll be uploading a longer video where I continue this challenge but focus entirely on styles from animated shows made in Ireland. It's more than you think. Stay tuned.